Hello, and thanks for tuning in. You have just found yourself at the Just for Admins webinar, where we'll talk about how you can make Slack work for your team. My name is Lindsay Whitlock, and I'm a customer success manager here at Slack.
Hi, my name is Christina Meng, and I'm also a customer success manager here at Slack.
So here's the agenda that we'll go over today over the next 30, 45 minutes-ish. We'll give you an intro about the role of a Slack admin, what it actually means to be an admin, some tips on structuring your Slack environment to best work for your team, a bit about workspace management. We'll talk about app management best practices, and then we'll show you how to take a look at your analytics to track your success and usage with Slack.
All right, now let's get into an introduction of Slack, the role of the admin, and an intro to what Slack champions are. So there are a ton of different definitions floating around out there as to what Slack is, and we are here to set the record straight. I think the most common one that we do here is Slack is a chat tool, and every time I hear that, I cringe just a little bit because Slack is so much more than that. And we're really going to lean to you as admins to really evangelize this message as well, that Slack is much more valuable than just a chat tool. So Slack is the collaboration hub where the right people are always in the loop and key information is at their fingertips. So what we mean is that we're connecting the right people and tools together to get the job done. So Slack actually stands for Searchable Log of Communication and Knowledge. I'll let that sink in for a second because that's exactly what that is. As Slack, everything you share in Slack is easily searchable and shareable, and it really does sort of become the collective brain of your organization. So I wanted to quickly take you through what Slack looks like if any of you are new to this, just to give you the lay of the land. On the left-hand side, you're going to see all the channels that you've gone in and joined. Now, this is not a comprehensive list of all the channels in your workspace. To see that, just click onto the word channels, and you're going to be able to browse through all the public channels on your workspace. So I said public channels, which means there are different types of channels. You can have public channels, which are free for everyone in the workspace to join, and private are invite only. So that's really good for confidential information. At the bottom, you'll see the message bar where you can type messages, share emojis, and upload files. You can also connect apps and integrations into Slack, which will send notifications into a channel. And finally, you can find what you're looking for very easily by using the search bar in the upper right-hand corner of your Slack workspace window. So Slack is all about bringing all of your different tools together into one platform. If you think about what you're using day to day, this probably looks a little bit familiar to you, but we're all using a ton of different software to do our jobs every day. With Slack's platform, we can connect your team's conversations with all of your tools, which enables you to streamline and centralize your work. And what this means is less fragmentation, less context switching, so you can actually focus on getting your work done. So here's a helpful visual highlighting the three primary roles within Slack. We have members, admins, and owners. Each of these roles have different permissions within Slack, and I'll dive deeper into admin-specific permissions in just a little bit. But before that, let's quickly review what the role of the admin is. So admins have different level of permissions within Slack, and the role of the admin is really to assist with maintaining policy, process, and settings within your Slack workspace. Some key admin responsibilities are setting up and managing your organization's Slack workspace, so including things like technical setup of things like single sign-on, deciding on settings like who can edit messages, or enabling two-factor authentication. Admins also manage user access, inviting members, inviting guests, managing your app approval process, which is big. I think a lot of our customers have a pretty strict governance model in place and have admin approved apps on. We're going to get into that in just a little bit. Some other roles are helping to answer Slack related questions, either in person or in channel, establishing and enforcing communication etiquette in Slack. And this is by no means an exhaustive list, nor will every admin have the same role, but hopefully this gives you a nice overview into the role of the Slack admin. Now, there's another unofficial role in Slack, and I say unofficial because they aren't technically their own user type, but they absolutely play an instrumental role in supporting admins at the workspace. These are champions, and Slack champions are made up of advocates who can help admins with some of the change management and enablement aspects of Slack. The key role of the Slack champions are to model best practices and actively encourage good habits in Slack, to evangelize the benefits of using Slack specific to your company, to answer user questions in help channels, and to provide feedback to admins and owners. And one thing to note is that admins are usually Slack champions, but not all champions are Slack admins.
All right, thanks so much, Christina. So now we're going to talk about organizing Slack for your team. We'll go over channel structure and permissions, default channels, how you can leverage those, and then we'll also introduce the concept of user groups and communicating great Slack etiquette across your organization. So channels are such a fundamental part of working in Slack. And if any of you work in Slack today, you hopefully already know that. Channels are great because it's really where people come together on a specific topic. They work really well because, first of all, the right people are included in the channel. All relevant information is in one place and it's searchable. Can't stress that enough. And new team members are able to get up to speed really easily, especially when you default to public over private channels. And one thing that we'll be mentioning a few times during the session today is the huge benefit in defaulting to public versus private channels. So we'd really encourage all admins and champions across your organization to get really comfortable with the concept of public channels that anybody can access based on the information they're looking for. So because channels are such a core part of how you get work done in Slack, having a really clear channel naming convention is key to keeping your workspace organized. Channels should reflect your organization's structure so that people can find particular channels really easily. They can track down the information they need and, of course, refine their search at any time. So maybe you're starting from scratch and setting up a few really broad channels to start, or maybe you're doing some cleanup and you want to take a look at the channels that exist today and do some renaming so that they're a bit more organized. Regardless, here are some recommendations that we would make on some relevant channels that you may want to have as part of your workspace. The first type is announcements channels. So this is important for company and team-wide updates only. This is not where conversations typically happen, but more where people can remain up to date on important info, typically related to either the entire company, so maybe an announcements global, or maybe it's just for a particular team, like announcements sales, announcements marketing, etc. Also, functional teams are a type of channel that we would recommend. So this is where you use departments as a prefix, and it's another, the prefix would be, the name of the department, so finance, HR, marketing, etc. And this is where members of those teams can chat about updates, projects, etc. that pertain to that team specifically. Myself and Christina are both in the customer success manager team channel, and it's a really important part of kind of our day-to-day work. Project channels are a big one as well. So we use the prefix PROJ for any project channel here at Slack. And these can be projects pertaining to one single department, or they can be cross-functional projects. So this is really where people from different departments come together to work towards a specific goal. So for example, in order to prep for this webinar that you're watching right now, we had a PROJ admin webinar channel where we collaborated on the content, the talk track, etc. for this webinar that you're watching. Offices. So channels for specific office locations can be really important. So we're based here in our San Francisco headquarters. So we're a member of our San Francisco channel. And that's where we have any San Francisco discussion that pertains to being a local in San Francisco. We have multiple offices, so we have a location-specific channel for each of those as well. Help channels are a big one. So this is where folks can request support from other departments. So let's say you have a general question for the human resources team, but you're not really sure where to start. You might start in Help HR, ask your question, and then allow the HR team to triage your question from there, get you in touch with the right folks to get your question answered. And then definitely don't forget about the fun stuff. So we have a number of social channels here at Slack, and many of our customers do as well. A couple of my favorites, I'm a cyclist, I'm a member of our cycling channel. And then we have a fun one, Lunch Under 10, where we chat about who has been able to score lunch in San Francisco for under $10, which is quite a feat if you live in San Francisco or the Bay Area. What are a few of your favorite social channels, Christina?
Yeah, so I love our dogs channel. I think almost every organization has one, very popular channel, but I also love grooming and beauty, where we talk about new products that we're trying. Yeah, I'd say those are probably a couple of my favorites.
Yeah, great. I'm a member of those as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about the general channel because it's a channel that every workspace has. Every Slack workspace begins with a general channel, and everybody is automatically a part of it. It's also a channel that members can't leave, which makes it sort of unique. And for these reasons, the general channel is perfect for important announcements that are applicable to everyone in your organization. So if you're worried about this channel getting too noisy for people, admins can limit posting permissions to just owners and admins only. Or if you wanted to, you could completely turn off the ability to use mass mentions like @channel and @here. Bottom line is it's important that your team knows what the channel is for and how it should be used. So a few recommendations there would be to rename the channel so its purpose is more explicit. For example, announcements all or announcements global. And then include instructions in the channel's purpose section so everyone knows how to best use the channel. Maybe a friendly reminder that this isn't a place for conversation. It's really a place to take in information. And just a tip, if you're able to loop someone in from your internal comms team or even a few executives, they can help get those important announcements out there and take some of that admin burden off your plate. It'll also help ensure that the messaging is lining up with your employee communication strategy overall. Another important part of setting up your workspace is taking a look at channel management permissions. One of the big ones is determining who can create, archive, and remove members from channels. Now, remember, our default settings are carefully designed to give your users the best experience and reduce admin overhead for you and your team. So, in general, we strongly recommend you keep Slack open and allow users to create channels as new projects and conversations come up. It's easiest to think about this like email, for example. People can create a new email thread whenever they want. So people should be able to create an entirely new channel in Slack if they think that's warranted and needed. And in general, I wouldn't shy away from creating new channels because it does allow people to organize conversations and files into a specific place. Something we hear from customers fairly often is that they're worried that their workspace has too many channels and that it'll be overwhelming for folks. But what I would say is don't worry too much about that. Remember that people are only joining channels that pertain to their work. So my workspace looks pretty different from Christina's workspace just because we're working with different people, different projects, therefore different channels. They're likely going to be channels that you set up in your workspace where the information that is shared and discussed is relevant to the entire company. So we recommend leveraging default channels. And these are going to be the channels that every member of your workspace gets added to automatically. So for example, outside of our announcements global channel, we have diversity inclusion, we have help IT, we have our released channel where we talk about new product releases. These are all default channels. So your first day at Slack, you're automatically enrolled into all of these channels. So just think about the channels where the information is going to be important to everyone, and mark them as a default channel so that nobody misses that really important channel that they should be a part of. So now you know how to add every member of your workspace to a channel, but let's talk about how you might manage your users at a more granular level. So I want to introduce you to user groups. A user group is an easy way to get the attention of many members at once by mentioning the entire group. You can create them based on department, which is actually where I would recommend starting, location, or even a project you're working on. They can be used for temporary groups, like those that are attending a conference together, for example. So as an example, let's say you wanted to let your accounting team know that customers are having problems with billing. But when you go into the accounting team channel, there's a lot of other people that are actually outside of the accounting team. You could send a message to everyone in the accounting team by typing @accounting and then your message. That's only going to notify the people who are truly a member of that team, not everybody in the channel. And you can create a user group around anything, not just departments. So for example, maybe a manager wants to set up a user group with just their direct reports so they can get in touch with them in one fell swoop. But wait, there's more. You can also use user groups to ensure that the right groups are automatically added to the right channels. So let's say you want to be sure that any new hires on the marketing team get automatically added to the marketing team's Slack channels. You can set that up in your admin settings. And anytime you add a new member to the user group, to that marketing user group, let's say, they'll automatically be added to the default channels that you've set for that particular group. Admins can choose to allow any user to create a user group, or you can lock it down so that it's admin only. But again, we would recommend leaving this pretty open and allowing people to create those groups when they need to. Again, reducing that admin overhead for you, which is always a nice result. You can also create user groups automatically by mapping them from your single sign-on provider. And we have a ton of information about that in our help center if that's something you're curious about. So to wrap up my section here on organizing Slack, as we discussed, Slack is for collaboration and creating that central hub for teams to work together. And in order to make sure everyone has the best experience working in Slack, you might consider sharing some etiquette tips with your team to help them develop those new norms. So here's some simple Slack etiquette that teams typically find useful when they are starting to adopt Slack. So I would encourage you to share these with your team. A few that are worth mentioning are at here and at channel. This is one that's at risk of being overused because people tend to assume that their message is relevant to everyone in a channel, but you want to be sure that Slack doesn't become too noisy for your users. So using this only when absolutely necessary is a great best practice to share with the team. The second one I'll mention is being respectful in channels that aren't your own. So the example of, me and Christina, for example, we're both a member of some channels that don't pertain to the customer success team specifically. I always love to see what the marketing team is up to, for example. They're running some really cool campaigns, and I like to peek in there every once in a while and see what's going on. But I refrain from taking over the conversation because at the end of the day, I'm not a member of that team. So while it's perfectly okay for me to join, as many public channels as I would like, I'm typically not chiming in because it's not a project that I'm working on. It's not a team that I'm a part of. The last one is leaving and archiving channels. This is okay. It is okay to leave or archive channels. In fact, Christina and myself do this all the time as our projects change, as priorities shift. It's a really important part of making sure that that sidebar remains really relevant to you. So definitely good to remind your users that it is okay to leave or archive a channel that is no longer relevant. A pro tip that I'd recommend here is the internal Slack champions that Christina mentioned a little bit earlier, who are supporting the use of Slack across your organization. They're a great vehicle for promoting good etiquette and helping users build these good habits. So definitely come up with your etiquette list and use those champions to kind of distribute that across various teams at your organization. All right, back over to you, Christina.
Thank you so much. Now let's get into some workspace management tips and information. We're going to cover inviting members, usernames and profiles, and finally guests and shared channels. So how employees can join Slack. There are several ways to invite users to Slack. You can invite them manually by entering their email address and full name, and this will send users an invitation via email. Additionally, there are two other ways to invite users, and they are to allow sign up with your company's email domain. So you just list out what your organization's email domain is, and then anyone with that email domain can sign up for Slack. Or if you're on a Plus plan, you can set up secure access with single sign-on and two-factor authentication. When it comes to inviting guests, that is by email invite only, and we'll get into that in just a little bit.
Oops, sorry.
So in Slack, you have two names. You have your full name and your display name. The display name is optional and are what most would call a username. So display names actually allow spaces, non-English characters, and capitalization. Admins can change individual usernames and display names if they want, and this is all done from the admin team management panel. So I cannot stress enough that one of the first things we talk about when meeting with our customers is to fill out your profile, please. Please update your profiles in Slack and encourage others to do the same. Your profile contains extremely important information that will help others find you and get to know you. Some fields like name and what you do are default, and as admins, you cannot get rid of them. But as admins, you are able to add custom profile fields so your team can fill them out. For example, we have office location, your dog or cat's names, and favorite food. So let's now talk about guest accounts. We often get asked if you can work with people external to your organization in Slack, and the answer is yes, absolutely. There are two ways in which you can do this, through guest accounts or shared channels. First up, we have guest accounts. So owners and admins can invite vendors, contractors, and important clients to your workspace. There are two types of guest accounts within Slack. Single channel guests, as the name implies, are limited to one channel, and they are free. So you get 5 free single channel guests for every 1 paid user that you have on Slack. Then you have multi-channel guests, and these can be invited to multiple channels, as the name implies, and you have an unlimited number of these, but they are billed as a regular user. So guests are only able to DM users that are in the channel that they've been invited to as well. So let's take a look at the guest profile. When you have a guest in your Slack workspace, your team will likely want to know why they're there and how long they're staying. So your guest profile page will show which admin invited them, how long they're here for, and which channels they're a part of. A best practice is to require guests to add their role and company in the What I Do section of their profile. Shannon here is a culture expert at TinyDot, and she's in the culture channel. Next up, we have shared channels. Shared channels are a really exciting feature that we launched this year, and they allow you to connect several people from an external organization instead of having to bring in each individual as a guest. Sharing channels makes it easier to loop in colleagues from both workspaces and share information and context more broadly. And for admins like you don't have to manage or pay for guest accounts. Shared channels are included in paid plans. So what we really wanted to do was to strike a balance between making Slack easy to use and work in, while also keeping your team's information secure. And because of this, we built shared channels with admins in mind. So only admins can share a channel with an external organization. And when user trusts a shared channel, they will be directed to ask an admin. So to set up a shared channel for your workspace, you can either create a new shared channel by clicking on the plus icon or share an existing channel. This will send a request to the admin of the other workspace, which they'll need to approve before the shared channel gets created. Once the other side accepts, the shared channel is live and ready to use. There will be a little company logo in the corner of the external person's avatar, so you can tell when folks are from outside of your organization. And then now you can send messages, upload files, use your apps, and use the shared channel just like any other channel. So a common question we get asked is, when should I use guest accounts versus shared channels? And so if you're collaborating with just one individual from that external organization, it might just be easier to use a guest account. But if you're collaborating with more people, definitely use a shared channel, as it allows for additional control and flexibility. So what are some of the benefits of shared channels? Shared channels provide a number of unique benefits to you, your partners, and your customers. They allow you to stay focused. So shared channels gives you easy and flexible access to customers, vendors, and partners through the same workspace you already use without jumping between Slack accounts or from Slack to email. And this reduces context switching and saves time. You're going to see an increase in productivity. So real-time communication via direct message or Slack calls means your teams can collaborate at the same speed as your internal channels. And finally, it allows you to scale easily. So as your business relationships evolve, you can easily add new people from either org, and those folks can quickly gain shared context and alignment by reviewing the shared history of work. If you're working in a complex partnership, you can create as many shared channels as needed, and when you're done, there's a simple flow for disconnecting.
All right, thanks so much, Christina.
Thanks.
So now let's talk about app management. Apps are a really core part of how we would recommend you use Slack. We are, again, more than just a chat tool. So we'll talk about Slack's platform, our recommendations for creating an app approval process, and some general best practices when it comes to managing apps on your workspace. So first, let's take a minute to get aligned on Slack's platform. So with Slack's platform, we connect your team's collaboration hub with all of your tools and services, which is really going to enable you to streamline and centralize your work. The goal here is to take that high frequency, low effort work that happens dozens of times a day, like checking your calendar, requesting metrics, and pulls them into Slack where your team is already working together. So this means less fragmentation, less having to look various tools up, less having to log into a million tools. And overall, it really saves time and brings more automation to your day-to-day. Our Slack app directory has over 1,500 third-party apps that you can integrate into Slack. And for anything that you can't find there, we have an open API, so you can build a custom integration to meet your needs. So let's talk about setting up an app approval process to make things easy for you as an admin. Now, apps and custom integrations are third-party tools that are connecting with your Slack environment. So first off, we recommend turning on app approval requests and then getting the right team involved who can review and manage these requests. So on the Manage Apps page here on the screen, there are settings for approval. Simply turn on app approvals. That would be step one. You can then restrict the permissions to select members like admins or members of your IT or security team. You can even use user groups to do this or manually add individuals. You can also set it up so that the app requests are sent to specific approvers directly via Slackbot, or, and this is the way that we would recommend doing it, you can funnel requests into a specific channel, such as Please Slack Apps or Help Slack Apps or something similar. And we recommend that you set pre-approved apps to speed up the process and avoid any bottlenecks. So if there are any apps that you know are going to get the A-OK from your security or IT team, go ahead and pre-approve those so that people don't even have to request to use the app. So to take you through what that app approval process might look like, here is what I would see if I did not have permissions to install an app. I would see that green button on the left to submit a request. Now, once I click that request to install button, I'll be able to add a message around why I want to install the app, as well as my business case, so that the approvals team can consider all of this before they approve or deny it. My request is then piped into a channel or direct message to the app approver so that it can be reviewed. Again, the reason why we recommend having these requests funneled into a channel is because it allows your approvers to group share the task of reviewing these requests and making those approvals. Now, if we look at the approver's perspective in that particular channel or direct message, they'll get a message from Slackbot with an overview of the app that was requested, who has requested it, and any notes that the requester has added. From there, they'll be able to have a discussion with their team about the request, ideally within a thread in a designated channel, and then easily approve the request with the click of a button. So super easy. They'll just go ahead and click that Approve for Team button that you see there. Something to call out is that when you're using an app within Slack, you are agreeing to their terms of service. So this might be something worth reviewing before you make that approval. And remember, you can also pre-approve or whitelist certain apps that you know will already get the green light. So don't forget to do that so that you are avoiding bottlenecks in this process. Now, that was a fair amount of information, so let's recap on some general best practices when it comes to app approval. So first off, decide whether you want to restrict who can add apps to Slack and who those people should be. We do recommend that you pre-approve apps within Slack that are trusted and valuable to your team, just so that you don't create any bottlenecks and take some of that legwork away from you as an admin, which is always nice. You can document and pin your app approval process as you design it within a channel like Please Slack Apps or Help Slack Apps, so users know where they can make a request and what that process looks like. And lastly, provide regular updates on each request that is made by updating in a thread or even using emojis. So here at Slack, when I request an app, someone on our IT team reacts with the little eyes emoji to indicate that the request is being looked at, and then they use the green check mark to indicate that the request has been taken care of. That way, I'm always in the loop about the status of any requests that I've made. All right, back to you.
Awesome, thank you. So now let's get into a hot topic that a lot of admins ask us about, analytics. Analytics provide you with an additional layer of context and detail into how users are using Slack and can really be useful in helping to identify areas to focus on. So analytics in Slack are broken into three main sections: overview, channels, and members. So here we're seeing the overview section, which covers the basics of Slack. You'll see high-level metrics across the top, members, weekly active users, the number of public channels, and how they've changed in the past 30 days. Under active users, here you can toggle between weekly active users and daily active users to see the number of each and how many are posting messages. You'll start to notice trends like more usage after a company event or Slack training session, or lower usage over the summer months when folks are off on some well-deserved vacation. So if you scroll down, you can see the breakdown of communication in public versus private channels. If one of your goals for using Slack, next slide, please. If one of your goals for using Slack is to increase collaboration and transparency and to break down silos between departments, then maybe you'll want to see a higher percentage of conversations happening in public channels. So under Manage Channels, here you can see channel-specific analytics, which goes deeper into the public channels in your organization. The data here is sortable by a range of fields, so you can identify channels with the most members, most recent activity, and more. Because channels are often dedicated to specific topics or subjects, gaining visibility into your most active channels gives you a good idea of trending topics and what's top of mind. Sorting data by different topics and fields can be a really powerful way to quickly spot an issue that needs attention. There are different ways you can customize this by adding and editing columns and by sorting. So all of this awesome data can help you measure the value of Slack. And as a customer success manager, we couldn't possibly run a webinar without leaving you with some tips on measuring the value of Slack. So let's look at adoption. Adoption allows you to see if people are actually using Slack. So what is the ratio of members who have signed in and who have remained active? How many messages are being sent daily? How many days a month are people active on Slack? These are all indicators of Slack adoption. Remember when I said Slack was much more than a chat tool? Well, some analytics can help you see if users are leveraging Slack for more than just chat or DMs. So for example, channel use and integrations use gives you insight into how people are collaborating and if they're taking advantage of the Slack platform. And finally, user sentiment is an important way of understanding how people are using Slack, what's working, and what could be improved. So some tips for collecting user sentiment are to run internal surveys to get feedback on Slack, and to analyze data by business unit or location to identify which groups need additional support.
All right, whew, we covered a lot. Thanks for sticking with us. Just to summarize what we covered on today's webinar, we talked about the role of a Slack admin, what it means to be a great Slack admin, how you can structure Slack to maximize its potential for your team, some tips for managing your workspace and the users within it, and then how to get insights on team usage by leveraging those Slack analytics that Christina just went over for us. So before we sign off, we wanted to remind you of our fabulous customer experience team. They are a global team and can provide support 24/7. The best way to get in touch with them is to type /feedback in any Slack message box in any channel. And it'll go ahead and open up a ticket for you where our team will respond to you directly in Slack. So again, another great way to get the help you need without leaving Slack. We want to reduce that context switching for you. You'll receive updates via email as well, so you'll receive them in both places. Definitely don't hesitate to reach out to them. They're a great team, and they'll be able to answer any and all questions related to Slack. We also hope that you'll build your own knowledge. So we would encourage you to navigate to our Slack Help Center, where we have a ton of great information. We actually have a ton of information specific to owners and admins, so definitely check that content out. And then test your skills and learn more at slack.com/foundry. So this is our in-tool interactive training app that is right within Slack. It'll take you on a 15-20 minute tour of the tool, ask you some quiz questions, make sure you're familiar and kind of have the general lay of the land. And then we have a ton more webinars. So if you liked this webinar format, definitely head over to slack.com/events/webinars. We have a number of really great webinars. Myself and Christina host a number of others, and we have our wonderful colleagues on a number of others as well. So check that out and find some other content that might be helpful to you or your end users. And thank you so much for joining us. We hope you learned a lot. Definitely check out the additional content that I just mentioned. Reach out to our customer experience team with any questions. We hope to see you again sometime in the future.